All right, hello and welcome. Excited to engage in another one of our really cool conversations today. Today, my guest is Jason Latas. Jason has had the ability to see and interact with the human energy field or aura since childhood. And first, astral traveled when he was 18 years old. Through his travels as a quantum consciousness guide, love that, he has learned from the Hawaiian kapuna, Peruvian shaman, Chinese martial arts masters, and I believe it's pronounced the Maasai in Africa, mixing his knowledge of the human genome, neuroplasticity, did I pronounce that correctly? The mind body connection and the spiritual traditions and knowing of many cultures. He takes a whole body approach to wellness and sees his clients from an energetic and cellular level. Jason, so excited to have you. Thank you for joining me today. I know we're going to have a quantum conversation and then some today.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Seriously, I've listened to your music, and I meant to say that earlier. I started, but I popped on, and I love classical guitar. So I started taking that as a kid, and then I was a chef, cut my finger, and had to put down the guitar because I could no longer play. And I haven't picked it up yet, but I'm looking at your guitars behind you, and I'm just so jealous. But listening to your music, seriously, even those little clips on Instagram. I felt this, it started out nice and slow. I'm like, okay, it's just Instagram, let's see. And I felt the shift. I mean, I don't know how you do that, but it's beautiful.
Well, I always kind of jokingly say, it's like, we all come here with our innate gifts and talents and abilities.
Yes.
But, I don't know about you, but I didn't really get like a downloadable instruction book from the universe telling me how to go about this.
You didn't get the copy.
No, I didn't get CC'd on the email or whatever.
Dang
There
it.
was no file attached or anything, so it's really been literally an unfolding and a revealing over years and years of time. But I guess, I think that's kind of how it works for all of us, and I love what you said in your, from a young age, how you had this ability to see energy, and it's like, like, what do we do with that? We were talking the other day and I'm like going, it was intrigued about how you see energy, whereas I hear it. And, so here we are perceiving frequency and vibration through completely different, receptors, I guess, for lack of better terms. So you got to tell me, man, what's this up about seeing auras? How did you handle that? What did you see? And even way back then, what did they tell you?
Well, it's funny because as a kid, as you're and I actually in my courses I start with your domestication because that's where everything happens when you're born, right? That program starts. You're learning about life and your brain's growing, and you're just recording stuff, looking around and going, oh, and you don't question anything. In fact, you don't even have the ability to because we don't have a frontal lobe yet. All we have is a lower and middle brain. So we're just rapidly learning at such an accelerated rate without the ability to discern.
Right.
And that's why still a lot of those programs were interesting that were written by a kid. But I didn't think it'd be different. I just thought everybody saw, just it's just glowing around someone's body, right? Like around your body, I just see this glowing field. And as a kid, I'm like, well, that must be normal. But my mother was really curious about it. And she, as I talked to her about it, she actually brought me to some people who taught me to really open it up and hone it in. As a kid, I could see colors. And it was really cool, which actually saved my butt quite a few times when you're in the room alone with a person as a kid, right? And it could just be a babysitter, but they were glowing red. And I just knew enough. And my mom told me, you ever see that, leave the room. And I exited the room and found out, years later that wasn't the person I wanted to be alone with. So as a kid, it was amazing.
That must have really helped you when you were younger and dating.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, yes, exactly.
What a great advanced warning system. Probably could have
I
helped us
know.
all throughout
Yeah,
the
if only
course
I
of
had
our
a little
lives.
alarm that went off, it would have worked way better. Um, because we override what we want to happen more than we do listen to our innate abilities. But my mom's favorite story was always she'd giggle that I used to try and walk through walls. And because as a kid, and I only have, if you think back to when you're a child, you only have a little bit of a memory, like little pieces. But I just remember that walls didn't seem, even though I could feel it, right? It just, they seemed permeable. And
Mm.
so I couldn't figure out why I couldn't walk through a dang wall. Maybe I walked a little too hard into a wall, and that's how it all happened.
No,
But it was fascinating.
makes perfect sense. I think even going back to when I was a kid, looking, up at the stars and going, you know what, we're like in the body of God. We're like in this body of this divine. Here's a little kid saying this, and it's amazing, I think, what we perceive. But you said something interesting. You talked about how it is that we pick up programming from kind of that age 0 to 7, where
Yeah.
we don't have that ability to discern. We just are absorbing information, experiences from our parents, from our
Yeah.
family environments, words that are being said that might not even had maybe even a negative intent, but were perceived as such. And these really kind of form the foundational beliefs of who and what we are. I'm kind of curious, does that resonate with you? Do you agree with that? Is that where really we kind of put our baseline programming down that kind of conducts our lives as we move forward?
Yeah. And it's fascinating because when you meet someone and you ask them, I've done a lot of, I've been self-employed for about 30 years. And so it's normal at events and things. So, hey, what do you do? Um, and then I'll go a little deeper. Well, like, so who are you? And most people can only just give you those labels that they wear.
Right.
I'm this religion, this Republican Party, and I like this, and I'll die for that football team. And you're like,
Right.
oh my gosh, you are just really being steered by these labels that were put on you as a kid. And a lot of the clients I work with, and it sounds cliche, I've got to do so much unwinding, right, to get to where they are. Because most people, if you ask them that deeper question, they go blank. And it's because we're just living these labels. And as we're growing, we're really just that brain stem and middle brain using the three brain theory. And that brainstem's just meant to keep you alive. And so you
Right.
learn that really young, like when to fight or flight, right? And usually it's flight or freeze is what you have as a kid. But as that brain grows, the middle brain comes online and it wants to know, am I safe? Am I loved? Am I cared for? And emotions start to come on. But our brain is growing. Like our cellular rejuvenation as a kid is so incredibly rapid that you can't even fathom it. So you're in this hyper learning phase, but you're hyper learning about the world from my brother told me what girls are like. My sister told me what boys are like. Boom, I wrote that on the program. And
Right.
most people will continue to marry that person, right? Or run those programs. And it could have just been the bus driver or the babysitter. It's not always your parents. It's
Right.
whoever you spent time with that you trusted, right? And we run these programs to our deathbed that were written by a child. And I'm so fascinated by that, that that's the main thing I do is I help people unwind and figure out who they are. Because they'll call me, people will text me and say, or reach out on Instagram. I want to learn to astral travel. And I'm like, whoa, okay. First, we need to start down here. You can't just walk in and say, I want to be a black belt by Thursday. You got some unwinding to do.
So, in my mind, it's like this kind of brings the question then, why was life designed this way? It's like take
Ooh,
spirit, take unlimited potential, take pure divine essence, crunch it down, slow it down vibrationally, put it into a little helpless baby body,
yeah.
still developing and stuff like that, and completely forget the truth of who and what we are. And then to add kind of like insult to injury or however you want to put it, add these programs that are limiting in nature that basically start to code what it is that we experience in our lives. And for years I'm like going, is that messed up or what? Or was that the way that the game was really designed for? I call it the cosmic game of hide and seek. Come in
Yeah.
here with all of your divinity, all of your unlimited potential, forget every single bit of it, be told that you're not good enough, not powerful enough, separate from God, universe, source, whatever, and then you start coding a reality based on that. I'm curious, what do you think? Well, I'd love to. Is that the way it's designed? If we were really here to play this game in this most elaborate school called Planet Earth, Planet Contrast, however you want to do,
Yeah.
is that
Earth
really?
School.
Yeah.
Earth
So,
School. We're down here to expand. I mean, if you go back to spirit, and of course, neither of us, I'm assuming, that's an assumption, don't know everything. Right. So I can only speak from my experience. The fun part is I've literally coached thousands of people from across the globe. So I've been able to really gather all this data and not experiment, but understand it through them. But what an amazing way for source or God to understand unlimited potentiality, then have unlimited droplets as the big ocean, right? Unlimited droplets out there forming into everything absolutely possible, every feeling, every emotion, everything. And as a spirit, we're already that. If we're a cup of the ocean, we're still the ocean.
right.
And what better way for us to come down here and experience diversity to grow that whole experience? And as a human, in the beginning, it's kind of tough. Once I really started to take that angle on it, I could actually, and I think somewhere in you said the game of life, you can gamify this thing. And it's fascinating when you start to understand frequency, right?
Hmm.
And how we're communicating. We're walking bio beacons. Our telomere and our DNA are like little antenna, and we're transmitting and receiving every millisecond with every person around us. And when you really go deeper into that, the law of attraction, that movie, I think, screwed more people up than it helped, but because it left a lot of things out. It's not the Corvette you want to go sit in to manifest, but once you start to figure out that frequency and then the physics of the observer effect, and they can't even hold an experiment without the thoughts of the person holding the experiment affecting the outcome, and how, so that means this being the grand experiment, how I expect you to show up for me has a profound effect on how your cells show up in respect to my frequency. And once you start to really gamify it like that, and I don't mean to play it down by saying gamify, but it's something everybody can understand.
Right.
It's fascinating how you can start to see the cause and effect. You can actually, between stimulus and response, you can take that moment of pause to say, how can I best respond to get, a favorable reaction?
Yeah. It's so funny you say about gamify, because I've used this analogy of the cosmic game of hide and seek. I'll never forget, I got a comment from
Nice.
somebody going, life is not a game. Boy, she was angry about that because obviously she'd been
Yeah.
through the ups and downs and the turbulence of the human experience, like all the rest of us. But
Yeah.
man, what could open up for us if we were to truly start to look at life as a game, as a matrix, as something that we can
Yeah.
program and shape and shift and experience? Because we really have an opportunity to experience our state of being, you know,
Yes.
our being our frequency, our resonance, our
Yeah.
thought process, our emotional process, all that impacts, which truly seems to shape and shift our lives and our experience. I mean, we get to experience it all. It's like I say, there's this field of energy that just listens to what it is you're broadcasting and it mirrors back. Listens, mirrors back. It doesn't judge
Yeah.
what you broadcast. It just mirrors back. It doesn't say, Jason, you really shouldn't feel or think that way. You might want to reconsider that. No, it's just going to mirror back. And then as a result, we get to experience the turbulences of life that show us where we might want to perhaps maybe let go of an old program from those early years that
Yes.
we picked up so that we can begin shaping and shifting a different experience for ourselves. So, in your mind, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to people really embodying that we code our reality, we shape and shift our life experience? What do you think's the biggest obstacle in the way that prevents people from taking that look within and starting to change their resonance, starting to change the broadcast of their DNA, et cetera, as you were sharing?
Yeah.
What do you think binds us the most?
There's well, two things. When my kids were growing up, I just used, analogies, right? That's the best way to teach. That's why the Bible did, right? Taught all
Yeah,
his kids that way. That your thoughts and actions are boomerangs, right? And you just throw that negative boomerang or positive, it's always going to come back to you. And so I found they really picked up on that, and I use different analogies like that. But what tends to keep people anchored is, and I'll try not to take too deep of a dive on this, is we're taught everything backwards. You know what I mean? And I think that's for a reason, but I'll leave that alone for now. We're taught
we
to,
can go there if you want to.
well, we're taught to go out there and change the world and make things happen and go hammer nails and make it happen, when really that's just the opposite. We're taught, I'll believe it when I see it, when it's really, you'll see it when you believe it, right? And so
Right.
we were taught totally backwards. And so people, and I feel for so many people in that arena, and I'm still doing it. I'm not perfect. We're still out there hammering hard, trying to, build what we want. But it's like, you don't walk up to a mirror, and if there's not a smile in the mirror, do you try and change that smile on the mirror? No, you've got to change this, right? And it's like that mirror analogy, if told thousands of times, starts to kind of settle in, but it takes a while to understand that, even the projector, it's like your projector's right here. You don't run up to the movie screen and try and change it. You got to change the film, what's projecting, because out
Right.
here is already, has already been projected. So you can go change that, but you're doing it a little bit backwards, and working a little harder than just changing the film. And
Oh yeah, we're going to get along just fine because I use this analogy also. How many of you are brushing the mirror trying to change the reflection?
yes,
It doesn't work
exactly.
that way. And but you're right. We've all been taught. We're told that if you're going to be successful, you have to work what? Work hard. You have to be responsible and get a career, work your way up the corporate ladder, which, I bought into for many years until I'm like going, you know what? This ladder sucks. There has to be something different. There has to be something more that I can move into, which ultimately led me, into my next part of my expression and ultimately the revealing of my purpose. So it's amazing.
Nice.
So you mentioned the fact that you've been coaching for 30 years. So obviously, as a coach, I know from videos I've watched of you, you've got some pretty interesting tools in your toolkit, so to speak, that can help people to, I think, what did you call it? Rewind or unwind?
Just rewire. Well,
Rewire. Okay.
first you got to unlearn so much that we think is real, right? And
Yeah.
then once you realize, and that's where, like in my course that I produced, it starts with childhood programming. And it's funny because everybody wants to just jump to the meat of deep meditation and all these great things that they've seen on social media as they're swiping to get that dopamine hit.
Right.
And it's they don't understand, and it's sales and marketing. That's how most people sell, right? They overpromise and underdeliver these grand schemes. But it all goes to your programming. It
Right.
all goes to, once you understand, oh my gosh, that was a child, and probably a very confused child that wrote the program I'm running my life on. And no matter how hard I tap the keys, right, it's not going to do what I want it to do. And so many coaches are out there teaching you to just practice harder to rewrite these neural programs, and they're not. They're hardwired. And it's a simple process, but it's a process of understanding how this body, your spirit's doing great. We don't have to work on that. It's getting this back in line and rewired, so then we can merge that spirit and body, you know. And I don't even know if I answered your question, because
No, you did.
I
But
just
I
I go
love
on
what
so
you
many
said.
deep dives. There's just it's I am fascinated by this, if you can't tell.
No, obvious. No, that was great. But I'm curious, we all have different tools and modalities as coaches, as healers,
Got it.
as people like, I like to obviously use music, so what do you got in your bag, Jason, that can help people to shift and let go of the old programming that's no longer serving them? Perhaps
Yeah.
maybe embed in new programming that opens them up to tap into the vastness of life that's potential for all of us.
Yeah.
What do you got in the bag? Come on, let's hear what,
And
because I know you
well,
talked about breath work,
well,
you
you can imagine in 30 years, it's more like a tool shed.
yeah,
There's so much. It's like, and I don't usually talk a lot about this, but I've coached everyone from, Fortune 100 CEOs that have thousands of employees that understand one little tweak in a neural pathway can change everything. But they're high performers. They get that. An Olympic athlete, that you can wire and teach them to visualize their routine and set up a set up an anchor, where they can become their routine and literally sit here at my desk and have them fully wired. And all they got to do is focus on their routine, and all their muscles are firing as though they're on the mat. And so it's different for every single person. What I've really tried to do is merge the spirit and the science and physics behind it, because when the church used to burn people at the stake for using science, right? Because they wanted that doctrine to rule. When science finally broke away from church, the church's dogma was so hardcore that they would burn you alive in front of an audience if you wouldn't recant, right? I mean, I can't even fathom that. But what science has done since it broke away is it created its own dogma. It didn't create the freedom that it's portrayed as. It will not recognize spirit.
right,
And so now science has a dogma, spirit has a dogma, and the quantum physics is the only world that's trying to merge the two
right.
and help people understand that. So I'm fascinated. What I've found over the years is, I was a trainer for a long time. If I just tell someone stop drinking soda, well, no one likes to be told what to do, and no one likes it. But if I tell them what happens as it goes into their body and the acidity and how your body has to balance that and pull calcium out of your bones to buffer the acidity, then women that are concerned about osteoporosis, they quit soda the next day.
Yeah,
And so, and that was just an example, but I like to take it a little bit deeper and show you how this meat suit is wired. Because once you understand it, you're like, oh my gosh. My husband was in Vietnam and he can't handle the fireworks. He's under the table and he can't. But once I show him what's happening at the brainstem and how it's being interpreted to your brain and how his brain is editing his reality,
right.
boom, within a few weeks. And then, of course, you got the coping mechanisms, the breath work, things like this, and it all works together. But I like to mix the knowledge instead of just showing you how to breathe. I want to tell you, first, it's been around for thousands of years. It's not a new TikTok trend. It's been around for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And there's so many types of breath.
Yes.
But if I can teach you that and tell you what's going on in here and here, radical change from just like, oh, I did breath work to like, oh crap, I get it. I'm rewiring that neural pathway that's causing this reaction. And so I really like to mix it. And when you're bringing the spirit in for a lot of people, you almost have to show them the physics behind it in a nice way. I
Mhm.
don't try and use all the big words. Just show them. It gives them permission to believe it because they've seen all these airy fairy things that they so badly want to believe in. But once you tell them there's some science and physics behind it, they go,
Mhm.
and then they can believe it. It's the most interesting thing because your brain edits your reality, and there's so much out there that is being edited out for you.
And it almost seems, and I'd love to get your take on this, like somebody really seriously amplified the edit button. I mean, I know I've seen you talk about sunspots and activity and light coming into the planet, and it's almost like And especially since COVID, it's like there's been this amplification of like people are starting to look at these systems and these places that have been in place that have been perceived truthful and everything like that. You know,
Yeah.
it's all of a sudden, wait a second, this doesn't resonate right. This doesn't feel right. So in my mind, it's almost like there's a consciousness revolution, evolution, really that's being amplified for all of
Yeah.
us, one degree or another.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what your take is on that. What do you see happening? What do you see unfolding? And what do you see the future, the potential for humanity of what we're emerging into?
Oh my gosh. You can tell I suck at yes or no answers. It's yeah,
That's all right.
I
That's
try
all
not to
right.
go too deep. We were talking earlier, just briefly, about the rewriting of religious text. I'll leave that by a Roman emperor, right? And most of you out there know what we're talking about. Um, but the Roman emperors are the one that said, and I think they said it was give them circus and give them bread, and they'll never revolt.
Mm,
And really, that hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. We've been programmed, and the people that actually run this planet, I'll say, because our president's just a talking head, as wonderful as they want to be. And oh my gosh, we are kept so distracted and misled so that those that run this planet can do whatever they want and keep running the planet. And they've actually, psychology runs everything now. And the most fascinating, and I'll use that term because it's fascinating, good or bad, it's like, oh my gosh, there's some heavy intelligence running the show. Um, they've psychologically taught us to build our own cage, shut the door, lock it, and then defend it like we're the warden of our own jail cell.
mm,
It's the wildest thing. That cognitive dissonance runs so deep that people are so programmed with just how it is, or with being home every Thursday night at 7 p.m. to watch that show. Once again, give them circus, give them food, Cheetos, and Netflix, and they're not going to revolt. If you threaten to take someone's Netflix and Cheetos away and coffee,
or their
you know,
phone.
yeah, or their phone. And there's just been this slow awakening over the past, I know you've seen it, at least 10 or 12 years, right? But and I may sound a little crazy, but these solar frequencies, I've never ever seen a solar storm that lasted 6 months this intense, not even in written solar history, right? And I've been able to work with people across the globe. And the only reason I say that is I've been able to understand, like, oh my gosh, the client, this client I've been working with is all of a sudden having these things happening. But someone in Chile, someone in Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, they're all having the same symptoms within that same week.
Right.
So something's happening. And it's almost like Spirit, the sun, was like, all right, I'm tired of waiting. I'm going to wake you guys up a little faster here. And people, seriously, those that are doing the breath work and shedding all those old repressed and suppressed emotions that keep us anchored and shifting and starting to really open to understanding. The coolest thing I think that's happening for humanity right now
Hmm.
is massive amounts of discernment.
Yeah.
People are now looking at things going, how did I ever believe that? Oh my gosh. And they're starting to kind of start to see through it. Also, the internet, right? The internet was actually originally a military application. And it's
Right.
still used that way. Like, hi, it's not just our fans watching us right now. And that's another rabbit hole. But we're being observed. We're being, and it's people are starting to pick up on that.
Yeah.
When Alexa the other day, my wife and I are watching a movie, and we only have that because one of our kids bought it for us, and our phones are locked in the kitchen. And this just happened a couple months ago. We were just watching a movie, and my phone rang, and I didn't answer it. And then we paused for a minute, and I went and checked, and I go, "Oh, hi, honey, you just called me." Our phones were sitting next to each other in the kitchen. Her phone called my phone. They were both locked. And then as soon as I opened up my phone, Alexa said, "Would you like to sync your contacts?" And so I'll let you read into that, but her
Yeah.
phone called my phone, and I never gave it permission to access my phone or my contacts. So, yeah,
And we
you
see
know,
that all
we're
the time. It's like we're talking, we're having a conversation. Next thing you know, you get an email from Amazon
yes,
promoting that same thing. So yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that more and more people are obviously having to aware questioning things and questioning the validity of things that we've been taught, our
yeah,
perceptions of those main institutions, whether it be religion, whether it be the media, whether it be the medical industry, whether it be the political machine and all that. And it's like, I go back at least 18 years ago, almost 20 years ago. And Doc, he was the guy who discovered the healing frequencies in my music, takes me out to lunch
yes.
one day. And he asked me this question. He said, Mark, do you ever wonder who really runs the world? I'm like, oh, no. I'm like, so we're like talking, and he starts sharing some things about the media with me. But I'll never forget one of the things that he said. He said, humanity has been blessed with the power and the ability to create and manifest and command energy through intention, through emotional frequency, through belief structures. I mean, I'm intrigued at this conversation. And he said, and we are being manipulated to create a world that's in disharmony, that doesn't work,
Yeah,
submerged into the
of
frequency
course.
of fear. And at that point in time in that conversation, I looked at him, I'm like going, and Doc and I had a very interesting relationship. I said, Doc, you must have done a lot of LSD back in. He said, well, yeah, I did. He said, but that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. And I'm like kind of going, oh my gosh. So that to me was like the beginning where I really started to question. I had started questioning
Yeah,
things before as a kid.
sure.
I never really fit into the square peg of the education system.
Oh
It
my
just
gosh.
never really resonated as truth for me. So I think, as you're mentioning, this process seems to be amplified. Obviously, I've heard about light coming into the planet and things shaping and shifting and awakening us. What do you
Yeah.
think's on the other side of that? What do you think's on the other side of us finally letting go of these? Literally, I see chains and things that have binded us down.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the potential future for humankind?
Well, first to backtrack just a little bit, if you had to rule the planet, and I'm just going to say, and you had nefarious ideas of what you wanted for the planet, it would be more difficult to run a planet of billions of people that were smart and healthy and were able to question authority. It's a lot easier if you just fatten their bodies and brains up and keep them glued to a TV or a phone and constantly distract them so they can't see the bills you're passing at midnight during the Super Bowl. But it's we've been so distracted, and we're slowly kind of waking up to this. It's a deeper, but I have a feeling we're kind of trapped in a karma wheel too.
Mm.
Some of this I think happens for our highest good, so we can learn and expand and come back, and I say come back and have other lifetimes, even though it's all pretty much happening at once. But that's a deeper rabbit hole. um it's we're being given the ability to level up our frequency at such an accelerated rate right now. If if we're willing to, some of the people that are asleep are still waking up. They're starting to see, like I said, for them, they're kind of getting discernment or starting to question all these things that they've just sat and taken for granted their entire lives. People that are doing the heavy work, just cleaning and clearing and emotional work, breath work, things like that, seem to be leveling up at a wild rate right now. I've got clients that are already starting to see energy that are, the frequencies in the ears, right? I've had that since I was a kid, and different frequencies mean different things. But people are reaching out to me like, "Whoa, what is this? You know what I mean? What's going on?" And I firmly believe timelines are starting to merge, and we're heading towards where everybody can start to wake up and merge. But there's an interesting split because these entities that rule the planet are able to do it through free will. I'm a firm believer that, light and dark, yin and yang. Light light always wins in the end. The old ad, you can take a light into a dark room and it'll light it up, but you can't carry darkness into a light room, right? It just doesn't work that way. And if you really look back at history and how people have been manipulated, it's psychological now. It's really strongly psychological, but they're using our free will. And people are choosing into this. You know what I mean? They're choosing into the comfort zone. They're choosing into ignoring everything else as long as they've got a little bread on the table and the entertainment. And I don't know how to really, it's a longer conversation, but I think there's going to be a split, and whether there's going to be, like I said, the new Earth, 3D, 4D, 5D, it's not just a light switch happens, right? Hey, we're in 5D, I can fly now. And, there's so many octaves between these layers of dimensions. And we're in and out of these constantly, right?
Now you're speaking my language with
I thought I might tap into that, but, and
Well,
people are given the choice right now.
well, I think in some ways this is already happening. It's like,
Yeah,
I look at my wife and I and how we go through things, and we don't get caught up in what's happening in Israel, for example, or what's happening in these things that are being flooded out through these different channels to kind of keep us in this lower vibrational state of
yeah,
fear and
yeah,
anxiety and worry. How can you create something out of that frequency wavelength? How can you manifest a world that works, a life that works, if you're constantly, dealing with the physical and the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual repercussions of being in that wavelength. But yet, it's like, I think more and more of us obviously are realizing that we can be in the world, but not of it. We can
totally.
have a life that works, vibrant health, connection, love, respect, compassion, all these beautiful things. Meanwhile, my neighbor next door is completely experiencing a whole different reality. Whether you try to
Yes.
define it as fifth dimensional versus third dimension, I think third dimensional words have a very hard time defining anything outside of this frequency wavelength.
Yeah,
It's like, how can you encompass source energy, unlimited possibilities, the field of pure consciousness, and one word called God? It's like we try to label and define things, but yet it's
yeah,
just like seeing the little tip of the iceberg of what's
I
there,
know.
you know? So we're doing the best we can, we're navigating the best we can. If you were going to share one thing to help people to, in essence, peel back the layers and reveal the divine masterpiece that's within them, what would that one thing be?
You're gonna giggle. I'd ask them to sit up straight
Mhm.
and inhale as deep as they can through their nose and expand their belly out like a balloon, not only out, but also down. What that does is it expands your diaphragm, it activates your vagus nerve, and it disengages your stress response.
Mm.
And we have been taught to live in a stress response. Even in the movies we're addicted to, there's it's just programming, and it keeps you understanding that you're in the machine, you're in the machine, and the big guys are always going to win, and the fighters are always down here in the trenches eating dirt, you know what I mean? And they're just reminding you, isn't it more comfortable just to sit here and watch a movie and just kind of let us run the show, and you do that. But what's happening is it's keeping our body in a slight stress response. Most people, and I know this sounds so simple, but the real stuff is simple. We breathe from our mouths to our chest. That keeps our body in a stress response. When our body's in a stress response, all it knows is there's a tiger in the woods somewhere, I don't know where, so keep the gates up. And as long as you're in that, your brain will edit your reality, your eyes will edit your reality. You will literally only see and perceive what's in that little box.
Mm.
And it's I do this all the time. People are like, that's all? And I'm like, yeah, breathe deep, disengage that stress response. You feel this wave of calm come over your whole body. And when you start to practice that, your eyes open, Your mind opens because you're not in that tight little freezing stress area. And all of a sudden you're like, did someone, are the lights brighter? Did you know what I mean? And it's like, no, your body is starting to open up and work and discern and act like it's supposed to. You're coming out of your cage. Something as simple as that. If the entire world could just breathe deep, with a nice pause, and learn to do that on a regular basis, I can't explain in a cellular way how much you wake up your body.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, if anything, through our conversation today, I really want you to take on this simple exercise.
Yeah,
Often are we conscious of our breathing? I use breath all the time in my work. Have people
yeah,
breathe in, expand. I have a practice myself where I breathe in and expand that lower breath that you're talking about.
yes,
Hold it
yes,
3 seconds and then I let it go. And like, if I find myself getting stressed out, if I find myself dealing with anxiety, maybe getting caught up with a little worry frequency or whatever, I'll take on 5, 7 times of that breathing process and it can shift my state. It's almost,
yes,
it can separate me from whatever the issue was, and I can see it from a different, clear perspective, and therefore
yeah.
able to respond as opposed to react in a way where I can leverage that to learn, to grow, to
Yeah.
move forward, to expand, and come up with solutions that I would never get in that restricted space. So that's awesome. And I want to encourage everybody to take on this breath.
Please.
How many times, can you give a little more, like, okay, so we're breathing like 5 times, how many times a day as needed? What would be your recommendation there?
Every time you catch yourself shallow breathing,
Mm.
when you're driving home at a stoplight, as soon as you program into your head, as soon as I see that stoplight, and you'll notice you're driving home from work all stressed out. That stoplight, you have little triggers like that. Boom, I'm at a stoplight. Breathe. Because you'll notice you've been thinking about what a crappy day you had or anything. You're thinking about everything else that's your imagination, except for right here, right now. And like I said, that's another rabbit hole, because when, like Buddha said, and probably 1,000 more avatars before him, everyone's like living the now. What does that mean? Well, it's like, if I'm depressed, I'm living in the past, and the past is a vapor. If I'm anxious, I'm living in an imagined future. So this isn't happening anymore. This is imagination. No wonder I'm missing out on the now.
Mm.
I'm trying to run a program on my computer right now, but I got 20 windows open. I don't have the energy to run that program. That program is life and
Right.
being in the now. Shut down the damn windows. Stop imagining all these crazy things happening that never happened. And just find, when you start to fall asleep at the keyboards during the day, right? You're shallow breathing.
Yeah.
Stop.
Breathe.
I had one of my masters that taught me in Maui. This guy was amazing, but he actually just had a little, and this is years ago, right? But he had a little timer on his watch, and every 10 minutes it just did a really light beep. Finally, I'm like, what is that? He goes, it reminds me to breathe. He goes, even though I teach this, I'm still human, and it's my boop, reminder. Am I breathing? And we all, if we think about it, just through the next couple of days, we will catch ourselves shallow breathing. What happens? You don't have oxygen. You're up here, so you got adrenaline and cortisol in your blood, which is whacking out your brain, and you have less oxygen. So your whole energy level's down here, and all you got to do is breathe. And that's what it does. It opens everything up, and it opens your eyes, it opens your brain, it opens everything. And it's
And it makes complete sense because you look at the breath is the foundation
yeah,
of meditational practices. It's, to me, I love yoga, and it's the foundation of yoga. It's not so
yeah,
much about the posture, it's about your ability to focus upon your breathing,
yeah,
and to observe your breath. And that has had a profound difference. So I love that, taking on these little extra exercises, hitting the stoplight, breathing. And it's amazing what can open up to all of us as
yeah,
we get connected to that. The one thing that all of us have in common, no matter what country you're from, what language you speak, what political party you're affiliated with, or religious institution, we all breathe. And that's
Yeah.
something that's inherent. And within itself is the greatest analogy about how we manage our own personal energy. We let go of what's no longer
Yeah.
serving us and embody what gives us life and lifts us to new levels. So you
I love
are
that.
definitely the rabbit hole man, and we're going to have to dive down some other rabbit holes in future
I would love that.
conversations. But Jason, how can people find out more about you? How can people tune in to what it is that you're sharing? Let us know.
Honestly, just Google me, Jason Latas. My first and last name. My website is jasonlatas.com. My Instagram, Jason Latas Quantum Body. Yeah, find my website and find me on Instagram, just Jason Latas Quantum Body. But I'm the only Jason Latas on there.
How do you
And
spell
reach
your
out.
last name?
Latas.
Awesome. There you go. So, hey,
Yeah.
everybody, remember to breathe. Remember to take
Yes.
those moments to get connected to that space, because another thing the breath does, it brings you to the most important moment there is, the present moment. Right
Yeah.
here, right now is where you had the ability to think a new thought, tap into a new source of wisdom. There's so much in this moment. So I really, once again, I want to urge you to take on those moments to breathe. I don't care how practiced you are at this. There's always room for improvement and expansion, especially as we go through the twists and turns of our own human experience. So awesome.
Yes.
Jason, man, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been eye-opening conversation. I knew you were a cool dude when I got introduced to you, and it has officially been confirmed. But thank you so very much. So once again, go check out him on social media, on Instagram, and give us the website one more time.
Just jasonlatas.com, JASONLATAS.
Awesome. All right. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in today and your commitment to unveiling the masterpiece that's within you. We all need to shine. We all need to share this beautiful truth of who and what we are, because that is the energy that's going to not only lift
Mm,
ourselves, but all of humanity to new heights. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. Have a happy and harmonious day.
Mark, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Mhm.